Great. Just trying to be mindful of everyone's time, so maybe we'll get started. Thank you. If you see me looking confused once in a while, it's because I'm having mouse issues. So I'm trying to kind of manage from my mouse and from my laptop here. So that's great. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the IESO's East Ontario Regional Electricity Forum. I'd like to first start by welcoming and acknowledging the representatives here today from the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Algonquin communities located within the East Ontario Planning Region, and acknowledge the pre-Confederation and Williams treaties, as well as the Huron-Wendat peoples who historically resided in Eastern Ontario. I'd also like to welcome and acknowledge those here today from the Métis communities of Eastern Ontario. My name is Amanda Flood, and I'm an advisor on the Regional and Community Engagement team with the IESO. And part of my work is to work directly with communities in the East and the GTA Central regions to best understand your community's electricity needs to help inform future planning. So while I go through a few details about this afternoon's meeting, I invite you to share your key takeaways if you had the opportunity to attend this morning's session. So if you wanted to share those in the chat function to the bottom right of the screen. So maybe, just touch upon what are some of the things that resonated with you? Did you learn anything from those discussions that you'd like to bring into our East Region discussion for further discussion this afternoon? So whether that's for today or to look at in the future. So if you'd like to, you can please go ahead and enter your thoughts. So as today's MC, I'll be leading us through this afternoon's agenda. And I'm actually joining you from the Bay of Quinte today. So when I say things like here in the East, when we're talking this afternoon, I'm actually meaning it quite literally. So as you maybe already know, these events have traditionally been held in person in the past. So we're really pleased to see that moving to a virtual platform has still encouraged strong participation. These conversations are so important, and so we really appreciate you being here today. It's not long ago that we gathered with many of you to talk specifically about the regional planning process that's underway in the Peterborough to Kingston region in this area. So we're in the early days of those discussions. And today's meeting, I'd say, is about having a dialogue to inform that work. So discovering what's driving your energy needs and choices, and what information or actions do we need to consider to move activities forward. Like I mentioned, I hope that you all tuned into this morning's forum. It brought together the 5 regional electricity networks here in the province to hear about recent trends and initiatives facing Ontario's electricity sector, along with some of the specific solutions that are emerging from various technologies and within various communities. If you weren't able to attend, a recording of it will be available soon for you to tune into. So not to worry. It's those learnings from this morning that bring us together this afternoon to bring you Eastern perspectives and to bring that into the discussion and to talk about some of the opportunities and challenges that it brings about for your communities and your businesses. So just at a really high level, some of the key themes that we heard emerge from this morning included community energy plans, how to kind of take those off the shelf, so to speak, dust them off a little bit and move them forward to an implementation stage. Demand side non-wires options as part of the regional electricity planning process, and how to, some interest around incentivizing efficiency, demand management, net metered solar and customer energy storage to be considered as part of the local supply in those planning activities. A big interest in decarbonization and electrification. So what does that look like going forward? And how is that being accounted for in the IESO's outlooks going forward when they're doing their work? Distributed energy resources, so that's a big one as well. So how can we better enable them, and how can we get a better insight into what's out there and the key role that they play going forward. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention cost. Cost is always a big one. Some of the feedback that we've received from previous forums is that it's helpful for the IESO to provide additional background information to participants to support the discussions. So in advance of today, we had posted a distributed energy resources backgrounder, or VERs as you'll often hear them referred to in the conversation. And we posted those on our new online engagement platform, IESO Connects. So hopefully you had a chance to review it in advance. If not, it is available should you be interested in kind of reviewing it later and taking a look at that. So I do encourage you to go to that platform if you'd like to find it. And so we talked about this morning. So I just see someone waiting to get in there. So we talked about the themes that we heard this morning, but I want to dive down deeper into the local level. So what are the key themes that we've heard in our discussions in the East before? So I'll recap those. These include many communities are looking at ways to address climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emissions through strategies, as I mentioned before, like a community energy plan, or more and more we're seeing climate action plans and or electrification plans. There's a desire to learn more about the future of energy efficiency and where it's headed in the province's electricity sector, but also at a broader sector level. And in conversations about fuel switching in this area, there seems to be a specific interest in learning more about heat pumps. So in particular, learning about the growing role and impact that heat pumps have on Ontario's system. So that's a key area of interest. So let's review the agenda at high level. Thank you, Patrick. I see you've got it on the screen there. To recap, this afternoon you'll hear about electricity planning that's underway in the East region with a presentation from our planner, Ken and Ip at the IESO. Following this, we're going to have a community panel discussion to hear from local community leaders in East Ontario about the work that they're doing and their perspectives on electricity needs, priorities, opportunities, and that will help set us up for some of the breakout discussions we're having today. The breakouts are something a little bit new that we're trying, so we're interested to see your thoughts on them. They're a chance to connect with others here today to share insights and information about what's going on in your own communities. So in lieu of when we do these events in person, you know, where you have that networking opportunity when you grab a coffee or during the break, we still want to provide a little bit of that chance to get to meet some new folks and meet some new faces. And then finally, we'll hear from Utilities Kingston about how the path forward for them is shifting to respond to their community's changing energy needs. I will try and go through these quickly because I know I'm talking a lot and I'd like to get to the presentations. So some housekeeping before we get going. These sessions will be recorded and they're going to be posted online afterwards for the event. Those unable to join us, or you can't stay for the whole thing, or if there's a topic that you'd like to revisit. And we'll be preparing a post-forum summary later in February, just to report back on some of the higher level themes that we've heard today. And just to clarify, we will not be attributing any of the elements of the report to any individuals or groups. And as mentioned, so this is a discussion. We encourage you to ask questions and provide comments and ideas by typing them in the chat window, or you can raise your hand to speak. There's the little hand at the bottom of the screen there, and I'll try my best to keep my eye on that. So I'll watch for your comments throughout the session, and time permitting, we'll try and get to as many questions as we can, but not to worry. Otherwise, we will make sure that we respond to your questions in the post-forum report, or if it's something that needs addressed earlier than that, we'll make sure that we do that. Okay, let's get started. Thank you, Ken, and I see you're there. So our first presentation, as I mentioned, is an update from Ken and Ip, Senior Transmission Planner at the IESO, about electricity planning in the East. Thank you, Ken, and I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, Thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone. My name is Kenan Ip, and I am a senior planner in the transmission planning team here at IESO. I primarily work on developing transmission plans to ensure that we're able to reliably and cost-effectively address forecasted load growth that we see for Eastern Ontario for myself. As Amanda pointed out, an important aspect of our work is to ensure that the plans we develop takes into consideration stakeholder feedback. So discussions like the one we're having today is a great opportunity for us to share with you the challenges that we're currently examining, and also to better understand your needs and priorities to help inform our planning work. So if we can move to, thank you. So electricity planning in Ontario. Electricity planning is carried out at a few different levels, all of which are quite integrated and impacts each other. The bulk system can be best described as our superhighways for transmitting large amounts of power, electricity across the system. They connect large generation sources to major load centers throughout the province. Bulk system planning typically focuses on adequacy and reliability of our 500 and 230 kV networks. And as such, assessing the impact, for example, assessing the impacts of nuclear refurbishment, or such as looking at renewable energy policies. The regional planning system, focuses on ensuring that there is enough transmission to support the load centers of a specific area. So keeping with that superhighway analogy, the regional system is kind of like your highway off-ramps and your major streets that cut across your cities and townships. As regional planning can overlap with bulk system planning, coordination between the two can result in optimal solutions that meet both local and provincial needs. In addition, regional planning provides valuable information on how load is growing within specific areas of the province, potential community level solutions within those regions, and this can really help inform planning at a regional and at a provincial level. The IESO lead transmitters such as Hydro One and local distributors work on regional planning through the OEB endorsed regional planning process. The OEB requires that regional planning be carried out once every 5 years at a minimum. And later on in today's presentation, I'll be providing some updates on where we are with regional planning in the East. The last one is distribution network planning. This really is your final mile in terms of getting power and electricity to your residential customers, commercial customers, and large DX connected customers. Local distributors carry out this planning of the distribution network and coordinating the priorities much more at a community level. So if we can move to the next slide. I'm not going to spend too much time here. I'm aware that I probably plan for too much content compared to the amount of time we have, but there are generally three high-level steps to planning. First step is identifying need. So we need to have a good understanding of what load forecasts are. We need to carry out assessments. We apply criteria, reliability criteria that we have to follow, and we need to identify the needs that we have to address. The second step is determining a planning approach. Here we'll need to answer questions such as, who does this need impact? What are our options to address this, whether it be transmission, generation, energy efficiency, distributed energy resources. We'll have to answer questions like, are these local needs, or these regional needs, or are they bulk system needs? The last step is really developing a plan. We need to have these plans in place to address the needs that are arising and to accommodate future load forecasts. One important thing to note is, doesn't matter which step throughout this process, stakeholders can provide very meaningful and very helpful input, both in terms of things like the speed and the magnitude of load forecasting, as well as the options that we're evaluating and the recommendations being proposed. Go to the next slide, please. So here you'll see a map of Eastern Ontario. This area starts just to the east of Toronto, in and around Port Hope and Peterborough areas, and stretches east all the way to our borders with Quebec. This area covers 4 regions, which include Peterborough to Kingston, Renfrew, Greater Ottawa, and St. Lawrence. Some characteristics of the East: this area is very rich in hydroelectric resources, which play a very important role in helping supply the local needs in this area, as well as providing good clean energy for the system as a whole. The transmission infrastructure in this area is quite old. You'll get a bit of a taste of this later in today's presentation. So certainly for the eastern area, the evaluation and the planning of aging infrastructure will be an important theme over the next 10 to 20 years as we continue to look at various regional facilities and bulk system facilities in the area. Go to the next slide, please. So as mentioned earlier, regional planning seeks to align bulk and regional electricity system planning with local distribution network planning. So when we do this, we're trying to focus on opportunities for coordination. And lastly, as I mentioned, there are 4 regions, and just to provide a bit of a quick status update, there are 2 planning regions in Renfrew and St. Lawrence, which are scheduled to start this year. So certainly please keep an eye out for those on our website as they will be starting up very soon. Regional planning for Peterborough to Kingston is underway. We're still quite early in that process, but I'll be providing short updates on Peterborough to Kingston in our next slide. And lastly, regional planning for Greater Ottawa was completed with Hydro One's publication of the Regional Infrastructure Planning Report in December of last year. I will also be sharing with you a few key items that came out of that particular planning work. Next slide, please. So for Peterborough to Kingston, during the first step of regional planning, Hydro One carries out a needs assessment for the region, which identified, in this case, a number of load station capacity needs that are expected to arise, specifically in the areas of Belleville, Kingston, and more broadly, the Frontenac area. The needs assessment also identified various end-of-life needs in the region and some of the major regional transmission facilities supplying the pocket. During the next step of regional planning, IESO's scoping assessment determined that the needs in this area are best addressed through an integrated regional resource plan, as there are opportunities to address the area's needs through non-wired solutions, energy efficiency, and in addition, there are areas of coordination with upstream bulk system needs. The IRRP is carried out by a study team, which includes IESO, Hydro One, and local distributors, including Peterborough Utilities, Alexicon, Lakefront Utilities, Kingston Hydro, Eastern Ontario Power, and Hydro One Distribution. The IRP is underway. We've been reaching out to local municipalities and large customers in the area to better understand community needs and to get a better understanding of load growth from their perspectives. As the IRP progresses, more information and stakeholder engagement opportunities will arise. So please follow that on our websites as well if you are interested in participating. Next slide, please. So Greater Ottawa. For this planning cycle, we continue to see strong community growth in the city of Ottawa, which continued a trend from the last planning cycle. This planning cycle was actually initiated 1 year early due to some of these growth needs. During the last planning cycle, load growth was identified in South Nepean area. Hydro One and Hydro Ottawa have been working on the development plans for a new station and a line upgrade in the area, and received their OEB approval just last year. So this project is underway to help ensure that loads in this pocket can be reliably supplied going into the future. As part of this planning cycle, we continue to see strong load growth in different pockets. So in the southeastern portion of Ottawa, in the Leitrim area, load growth was identified there, and as part of the planning for this round, it was recommended that new facilities, a new transformer station is required in the near term to reliably supply the loads in that particular pocket. So we will continue as a study team, planning team, to continue work and planning out developments such as that. Another pocket of load growth was around Canada-Stittsville. This area also showed a lot of strong growth. This is an area that the study team recommended that we monitor at this point, as there is an ongoing bulk system study that's occurring at the same time, which can potentially change the upstream system, how this area is configured, and as such, could offer some different opportunities in addressing the load growth needs in Canada-Stittsville. So we're adopting a bit of a wait and see approach and see what type of outcomes will come out of the bulk system study and coordinate with that accordingly. In the short term, the study team is recommending using targeted system cost-effective energy efficiency measures to help manage the load growth in the area. And in addition, some minor distribution level improvements to enhance the flexibility and resiliency of the system to handle any type of events that could pop up into the future. So next slide, please. So bulk planning for the Gatineau Corridor end-of-life study. So this is a large corridor that stretches from Oshawa area all the way to Ottawa, and to also generation resources in the Schaff Falls and Arnprior pockets just north and west of the city. These circuits were originally constructed in the 1920s and 30s and are expected to reach end of life over the next 5 to 10 years. While it's difficult to see this on the diagram, the corridor weaves in and around the 401 as you drive between Toronto and Ottawa. So certainly keep an eye out on them the next time you make a drive through this area. Don't know when that will be. I'm certainly on the road a lot less these days, but hopefully in the near future, I'll be making that trek soon enough. When you do make this drive, you might notice that the towers look a little different. They're a little bit shorter than what you may typically see for steel towers, as it uses a slightly older design than the more common structures that you see in other parts of the province. In terms of the study, it looks at a few key areas. It looks at the bulk supply to Ottawa, the regional supply to Ottawa, the regional supply to Peterborough, and as well the Schaff Falls area generation, which includes looking at some of the import capabilities there from Quebec. The study assesses the scope of the refurbishment for the end-of-life facilities in coordination with reliability needs arising over the long term. We're working jointly with Hydro One on the study as it involves large amounts of aging infrastructure, and plans for sustainment and development in this area must be well coordinated as such, to ensure that the system can be continued to operate reliably, both in terms of the short, near, and long terms. Next slide, please. So there are a number of reliability needs forecasted for Peterborough and Ottawa areas over the next 20 years. Most critically, but not limited to, the load meeting capability, or in other words, the ability to serve load of Ottawa is forecasted to be exceeded by roughly around 2030. Peterborough area has needs as well today that do require reinforcement. Now, it's important to understand that these are needs to meet planning criteria. And for that reason, it's critical that we start working on these plans, looking at these reinforcement options for these areas to ensure that we can continue to supply these areas reliably over the next 20 years. The last point would be, without refurbishment of the existing facilities, the needs described above do worsen, advancing the need date. Next slide, please. So one of the things with, as I mentioned before, a critical part of planning is to develop load forecasts. And I think this is an example of how load forecasting can certainly play a big part in terms of how we identify needs and how we make recommendations. So on this slide, what we're trying to show is the Ottawa demand forecast. As you can see here, there's a bunch of different lines. And what you can see here is, depending on the forecast, depending on the high growth or lower growth or reference, we are kind of hovering in and around the system's capabilities. And that obviously presents some challenges, both in terms of identifying when the need occurs, as well as some challenges with when you make a recommendation, how much are we investing in our system? How much existing or incremental capability should we provide the system so that we are addressing the load growth cost effectively, but also ensuring that we do have flexibility in case of higher growth scenarios popping up and arising. So for this particular study, it was quite important to take a look at different scenarios in case that there are some higher growth things. And as we've seen in the chat, and as I'm sure we've talked about earlier this morning, there is a lot of interest in this area, certainly around things like electrification, conversion from other forms of gas heating to electrical heating and gas pumps, heat pumps. So certainly there is a lot of importance to looking at these scenarios and including those considerations as we develop plans for these areas. Next slide, please. So in terms of options, we're currently evaluating a couple of different options right now, or I should more accurately say packages of options. The first one is really doing a full refurbishment option. As included as part of this is a reinforcement to the Peterborough area. This option is probably the preferred option because it's of the lower cost, and it also addresses all of the needs identified at this point. The other approach to this is doing a partial refurbishment. So this particular option package involves the decommissioning of 2 circuits in this Gatineau corridor. What's common in both options is the need to reinforce Peterborough area. But as part of this package, it also includes a reinforcement of the Ottawa area from the St. Lawrence pocket. The St. Lawrence area is a very strong system source, has an interconnection with New York there, and also is the location of large the hydroelectric facilities in Saunders generating station. So this particular package effectively trades the need to refurbish a couple of existing transmission lines with a new line that can accommodate more load. But it does come at a slightly higher cost. Next slide, please. So some additional considerations for this Gatineau study is while the full refurbishment package does not address the high growth scenarios, it allows for the deferment of a double circuit 230 kV line from St. Lawrence to Maryville. So it certainly doesn't take that option away. All it means is we can defer it more into the future and wait and see a little bit if the need of it continues to persist, if load growth continues to persist. This particular option will allow us to, in the future, trigger such a line from St. Lawrence to the Ottawa pocket. So even if the high growth scenario develops a little bit sooner than expected, it's important to note that there are other options to mitigate this risk. So just because if the load appears, it doesn't mean that we're in a state where we're unable to supply the load. There are other options with all the interconnections that are available in that particular area, and also some further managing growth efforts, whether it's through energy efficiency or some other non-wire solutions in the pocket to help manage that. So the critical aspect of this engagement is really to inform the trade-off of this deferral benefit versus this load forecast risk for the Ottawa area. So between, we're starting to share some of that information now, but between now and when we complete the study, which we're kind of targeting towards the middle of this year, we look forward to collecting additional feedback from stakeholders to help inform this recommendation. Next slide, please. So as noted throughout this presentation, your input is an important consideration as we develop plans. Key inputs around your energy needs, how you see load growth happening, your community preferences and choices around new infrastructure, coordinating things such as community energy plans with our regional planning and to help also inform our upstream bulk planning is really important. So we certainly want to hear from you throughout all of our various planning engagements. So please participate where your interests are in terms of the things that are going on. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take some questions. I know some of you have already provided some questions earlier, so I think I'll pass this back to Amanda to help coordinate any questions and answers at this point.
Super, thank you, Kenan. Some of the questions I think I was able to address in the chat, or you covered it as part of your presentation. So as Kenan mentioned, we have some time for some questions now. So if you have a question, you can put it in the chat there, and we also have some questions that were submitted in advance on our IESO Connects platform. So first, I guess the first one I just want to touch upon, Kenan, it's like a technical question. It's in regards to the map on slide 6. So the question was asked, why do we not see the far east of Ontario, east of Ottawa on the map? So I don't know if it's just not clear on the map or...
Sorry, I don't have the map back up, but the map should include the entire eastern portion of Ontario. It should show the Ontario all the way to the edge where we're close to Quebec. So maybe it's just the way the image is laid out, but this does cover the entire eastern Ontario.
Thank you. Okay, and we've got a question in the chat. Will the Ottawa update include the assessment of options to manage demand through behind the meter investments instead of just meeting a demand forecast?
Good question. So as part of any planning study that we do, taking a look at all options is important to that. So taking a look at the continued Ottawa studies that are ongoing right now, looking at how we can continue to supply the Ottawa area, specifically the 115 kV system, we are examining and exploring other options. So I think there have been some questions posted earlier in and around what does the IRP look at? So certainly non-wires options are included in that, but certainly it's, as you know, this is a continued effort. We're trying to get better with how we characterize needs, how we look at non-wires options, whether that's in front of the meter or behind the meter. And these are certainly areas that are considered as part of the assessment. And we're hoping when the assessment is nearing its conclusion, we can certainly share some of those insights in terms of how they were looked at and how they would be considered as part of the options analysis.
Okay, thank you. So this is a follow-up question about the study, Kenan, I guess the scope. So there's a question, does the study include Prescott and Russell regions, so the United Counties of Prescott and Russell? So they are captured in the Greater Ottawa Planning Region, but perhaps you can just kind of clarify the exact scope and focus of the study.
So as we wrapped up the Greater Ottawa Regional Planning exercise for this cycle, one of the outstanding items was focused around the Ottawa 115 kV system. And this particular one, the reason why it was not concluded as part of the Ottawa IRP and the Ottawa RIP was really focused on a couple of things. It was a bit of a complex study. There were lots of upstream considerations involved with the bulk studies that were occurring at that particular time. So as a result of that, we decided to continue studying this beyond the regional planning timeframes. So that really is the scope of the continued studies that are ongoing at this point. We are dealing with the recommendation that came out of the IRP, which is to evaluate the Ottawa 115 kV system. The Prescott and Russell areas are certainly loads that are supplied by this particular system towards the outer east area. So in terms of how it's considered, well, it's considered as part of this overall system's ability to supply all of the 115 kV system load. but this study doesn't look specifically into maybe some of the more local needs in the Prescott and Russell areas. Those really should have been examined through the regional planning efforts. So by all means, if there are certain things that again are arising and they do require some further study, then we do look to the regional planning process to be kind of, wouldn't suggest re-kicking start the whole thing, but certainly through that process, if there's a need to look at something further, that would be where it should occur.
Thanks, Kenan. So I'm going to take one more from the chat, and then we do have some that were submitted ahead of time, as I mentioned, on the online platform. Hi, is there any planning to upgrade existing structures? So kind of what we call the last miles to home, farms, and businesses. So this is referring specifically to existing aging structures that are already established.
Mm-hmm. So from if the question was more focused on distribution facilities, I don't think I'll be in a good position to comment on that. So I'll defer on that one. But maybe perhaps Amanda, we can take a note for that, and if maybe we can connect the right parties to be able to better respond to that. From a transmission perspective, I don't think there's any existing plans that actively go out there to look at specifically upgrading a structure. Our plans are all focused on identifying needs, identifying reliability needs or end-of-life replacement needs. And from there, our focus is to look at the most cost-effective way to approach things. So in some cases, as we just mentioned through the Gatineau Corridor end-of-life study, we are looking at a lot of different transmission lines stretching between Oshawa and Ottawa, and whereby there are cost-effective solutions that provide greater reliability to meet our identified needs. We will explore that. The focus is not necessarily to just think about upgrading the infrastructure or replacing the infrastructure. It is really looking at whatever is the most cost-effective option to addressing reliability needs as they arise.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears to here. I'm just looking at the time. I'm going to try and get to 2 more questions, but as I mentioned, if there's anything that we don't have the opportunity to address, we'll make sure that we do afterwards. Okay. So this question is about the regional planning process. Integrated resource planning was introduced in the 1990s to specifically include investment in demand-side resources like electricity efficiency and behind-the-meter generation and grid planning. The current IESO IRP process cannot really be called integrated resource planning because it just assumes a demand forecast, thereby excluding possible optimal non-wires options such as incentives for efficiency, demand management, net metered solar, and customer energy storage. Are there plans to include demand-side options in future IRPs? This would mean including government agencies that are directing demand-side programs in the planning process and acting with them on implementing the optimal plan for each region. It would result in much more effective planning in Ontario and minimize the cost of meeting future demanding climate goals.
So first off, I wanted to clarify that the current IRP process certainly considers non-wires as part of it. There are 2 points where the impact of things such as DERs or energy efficiency, where they're taken into account. So during the forecasting development stage, in this particular stage, it's not just simply about forecasting load. We are forecasting demand or net load, if you want to consider it that way. During this particular step, we are accounting for programs or facilities that are committed. That is, they either have a contract if you're a generator, a microfit, a fit, a behind the meter. If you have a contract in place, they are considered as part of that demand forecast. So their impacts are considered as part of it. In terms of energy efficiency, we do the same thing. So whatever energy efficiency programs, whatever framework that we have right now, the impacts of that on demand is also taken into consideration as part of the process, which effectively makes a bit of some base assumptions to what the load is before we move into a transmission technical assessment to identify need. Now, the second stage of the process where we consider these is during the options development stage. So after the needs have been identified, non-wires options, again, including DER and EE and other things, are included and screened for technical and economic feasibility. What I think you'll start noticing is, this is all a continued work in progress. We are continuing actively looking to get better in doing all this. So if you refer back to some of the more recent regional plans, whether that be the York, Windsor, Essex, or Ottawa plans, you'll start noticing some improvements in terms of how we're characterizing the need, a bit of a more of a shift to an hourly approach to when the needs occur, how often they occur, the magnitude of them occurring. And that really is to do one of two things. Is one, to help inform the non-wires options development stage and the way that we screen and we examine them. And it is also another way to help communicate the need a little bit more broadly so that we can also get some more feedback from interested stakeholders in that area.
Thank you. I am aware of the time. I just want to try and touch upon two more. The first one I think is a quick one from the chat. So that there's a question about the St. Lawrence corridor, so the St. Lawrence region, in regards to when regional planning will be underway. So perhaps you can give an update, Kenan, on the St. Lawrence needs assessment.
Mm-hmm. So the exact timing is, I don't think we've identified as a study team. It will certainly be this year. So maybe towards the middle of the year might be a good guess at this point. But I don't have a specific start date for that one just yet because it hasn't been finalized in terms of when we're starting. But it will certainly be in 2021.
You can subscribe for updates about that region on the IESO's website. We've got a slide at the end of today's session where it directs you there, and then you can just self-subscribe to St. Lawrence region, so you'll get notifications for all of those updates. Okay, so this one might take me a moment to read, but I'd really like to try and get to it, Kenan. We are a community organization of people living in the Ottawa area, which of course includes a large rural component and is therefore vulnerable to development of industrial scale or grid scale wind power development. And indeed did have a proposal put forward in 2008. Our question relates to energy planning. Given Ontario's history with grid scale wind power development since 2006, and the many negative impacts, including environmental effects such as noise pollution, noise emissions, including harmful low frequency noise, harm to Ontario's bird and bat populations, including endangered species, and a possible relationship between seismic effects of wind turbine construction, operation, and local aquifers, as well as the increased costs of electricity resulting in energy poverty. So we have this question. Will the IESO incorporate cost, benefit, and impact analysis for wind power generally as a source of power generation? This was never done, despite advice from 2 Auditor Generals to do so. We would ask that the IESO work closely with the Ministry of the Environment to ensure that regulations are reviewed in context of recent research and regulation in other jurisdictions, and that these regulations regarding noise and other impacts of wind power facilities are revised, especially setbacks from homes, and ensure that contracts do not contain a must-take clause. As you may be aware, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has had more than 5,400 formal complaints of excessive noise, many with adverse health impacts due to sleep disturbance and other effects, filed between 2006 and 2017. And that's credited to Source Wind Concerns Ontario from documents obtained under Freedom of Information. So just to recap, will the IESO incorporate cost, benefit, and impact analysis for wind power generally as a source of power generation?
Thank you for that question. Certainly it's a very good question. So the one things I want to clarify is IESO's core mandate is to ensure the reliable operation of the electricity system So that also includes future and long-term planning for the system. The other mandate that we certainly have in this particular area is to ensure that any plans that are developed are cost effective and provides the greatest ratepayer value. So with that being said, the focus around future resource procurement here at the IESO, our position is we're really technology agnostic. Our focus is to see how the technology performs and ensuring that we are making the recommendations most cost effectively. There is a resource adequacy engagement going on as well at this point. So perhaps that is a good area to sound this particular type of comment as well. A good place to maybe address this this question. But further on this, the comment on the General Auditor General's recommendation. I don't have any specific comments in response to that at this particular time. But Amanda, I think this is a very good point. I think it's a good idea that we take this question back, better understand the specific recommendations, and better understand what IESO has done or will plan to do in the future with regards to that.
Great. Just making a note of that. Thank you. Thanks so much, Kenan. I wish we had more time to keep going. Unfortunately, I got to be the heavy and I got to keep things rolling here. So we really appreciate that update. That's great. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. So next on the agenda, we have our panel discussion, and the panel will provide insights into key characteristics and theme within the East region. Let me move this over here. So we have Nick Schroeder facilitating the panel, and Nick's going to be wearing two hats today. So he's going to participate in the capacity of a panelist, but also he's going to facilitate the discussion. And Nick will be providing instructions or introductions rather on our panelists. But first I'm going to take a moment to introduce Nick. Nick is the Director of Energy Efficiency at the IESO, and he's led the development of 4 energy efficiency frameworks in Ontario, and that includes the upcoming 2021 to 2024 conservation framework. Nick actually has a direct connection to the region. He was born and raised in the Ottawa Valley, and he attended Queen's University in Kingston, and he spends much of his holidays, when holidays are a thing, when travel and getaways are a thing, in the Ottawa Valley with his family. So with that, thank you, Nick. I'll turn it over to you to facilitate the panel discussion and introduce our panelists.
All right, thank you, Amanda, and good afternoon, Eastern Ontario. Yeah, unlike Amanda, I'm not currently in the region, but rather I've been spending my COVID days up in the northwestern region of Ontario in Dryden with my in-laws. But to jump right in, so IESO, and formerly the Ontario Power Authority, we have been delivering conservation programs across Ontario for over a decade. And actually this month, we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary for the Save on Energy brand. As Terry mentioned in his opening remarks this morning, for those who caught him, throughout these years, we have seen great changes in the types of programs available to Ontario residents and businesses, types of incentives, the maturity and the sophistication of the marketplace, which ultimately has increased the value we're able to derive from conservation frameworks and their associated programs. So when the OPA merged with the IESO back in 2015, we were able to bring the perspective of grid operations as well as long-term system planning when designing and delivering these energy efficiency programs available in Ontario. These key changes was the ability to target energy efficiency in regions or communities that have specific system needs, leveraging one of Ontario's most cost-effective resources. And we have seen some successes right here in Eastern Ontario. As Kenan mentioned in his presentation earlier, we have been working closely with Hydro Ottawa in 2020 on a local targeted energy efficiency program called Retrofit Plus, to enhance some of the existing incentives for peak demand reductions for retrofit projects in the growing Canada North and Stittsville region. This local program forecasted to offset around 3 megawatts, or close to 50% of the near-term peak load growth in this targeted region. We have also worked closely with Utilities Kingston on a smart thermostat program for the residential customers, as well as Peterborough Utilities on a direct install commercial refrigeration program for small businesses in the region. Given some of the benefits that energy efficiency programs have, given some of the benefits that energy efficiency program provides to our grid and consumers, as well as its contribution to our local economy and competitiveness, we were able to secure a new 4-year energy efficiency framework from the government, which we just launched 2 weeks ago here in Ontario. This new $700 million framework will focus on cost-effectively meeting our system needs, including targeted approaches to address regional and local electricity needs, like we saw in Ottawa last year. The programs will continue to target commercial, institutional, and industrial customers with a renewed programming for income-eligible electricity consumers, as well as on-reserve First Nations communities. Some of the new items we are seeing include the continued evolution of our pay-per-performance program, which includes both a peak demand and energy reduction payments based on measured whole building energy improvements. As well, we're developing an open call for customer-driven solutions from the industrial sector related to this framework. If you want more details on these programs, I do invite you to visit our Save on Energy website, which has all the details on our available incentives, our targets, and budgets for this new framework. I also want to put a plug in for their upcoming energy efficiency auction, and this is set to launch in March of this year. So this $5 million initiative will pilot an auction mechanism to procure around 13 megawatts of incremental peak demand reductions from energy efficiency and non-dispatchable load shifting resources. We hope to use this pilot to generate practical learnings to inform long-term energy options for enabling energy efficiency to meet our system needs in the future. So these are some of the things that excite me about the work about how the IESO's longer-term vision is to enable distributed resources, including energy efficiency, to compete alongside other resources to meet our Ontario system needs. So hopefully that provided a flavor of the work that we're doing here in energy efficiency in Ontario. But I think you've heard enough of some of the IESO folks, and I do want to bring in some of our other 2 additional leaders to join me on this panel. So first up, I want to introduce Dick Baker. He's the president of Co-Energy. Dick was involved in the renewable energy sector for almost 20 years, having set up the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative, or OREC, back in 2010, which is focused on providing Eastern Ontario with clean, community-financed renewable energy. He later went on to create Co-Energy in 2018, another co-op focused on community-owned sustainability projects, from energy efficiency to renewable energy to electric vehicles, which I'm excited to hear more about today. So Dick is no stranger to Eastern Ontario, having been raised and now working in south of Ottawa in a Manotick station. He even completed his BA and his MBA in the region at Queen's University. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Dick, for a few opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think there's some slides. Good. Okay. Yes, I'm going to represent both OREC and Co-Energy. I was one of the original founders of OREC 12 years ago, or 11 years ago, and now we created Co-Energy because of some limitations on what OREC can do as a renewable energy cooperative. Both of them are driven with the same mandate of enabling citizens to own efficiency and generation assets in their own community. Next slide. I only have 3 slides here. OREC, as I said, was created as a renewable energy cooperative in 2010, and it now has 21 operating assets, solar assets. We will do other types of generation where appropriate. We would consider wind or other renewable technologies, but solar is pretty straightforward and relatively simple to do. Relatively, I say. We have, as of January 1, 780 members, 21 operating assets. 3 of them are net metered. The rest are all fit contracts, and we're 100% member financed. Co-Energy was created in 2018 as a more traditional cooperative, so it can do a wider range of things: energy efficiency, on-site, virtual net metering if it's allowed, retrofits, and generation. And its mandate is to enable community cooperative ownership of deep energy retrofits. We now, as of January 1, have 340 members and 5 relatively small energy efficiency retrofit projects in operation now. Of course, we have been delayed somewhat by this little COVID blimp that we're dealing with. Next slide. Both of the organizations are focused on raising community capital to address the climate challenges that we have and to return a fair, modest, but hopefully consistent profit to our investors. We're both for-profit cooperatives. The core challenge we are going to have as a society moving forward in the energy area and in the efficiency sustainability area is to deal with the NIMBYism that is against, as a knee-jerk reaction to any industrialization. And there was a question earlier about wind. Part of those concerns are valid in that question, but many of them are not valid. But local ownership and control gives citizens a direct interest and involvement in creating a local means of addressing the climate challenges that we have. Next and last slide. So here you see 3 pictures of what Co-Energy and OREC are about. The larger picture is one of the 2 most recent schools that we've installed with solar. This is the Mer Bleu school with the French Catholic School Board in Orleans. That was installed on November 8th. November 19th, we turned on an almost identical system in the Stittsville, Canada North area of west on Ottawa. And both those systems are net metering systems where all of the generation is consumed by the school, effectively reducing the load demand in those grid areas. You see a picture of one of our AGMs where the citizen owners are making decisions on the next year going forward. And the bottom picture is a picture of the RA Center where we have financed all of the outdoor lighting for their sports facilities. So that's a relatively small project, but that's the kind of project we would like to be doing more of as Co-Energy as we move forward. So that's my little background of what Co-Energy and OREC are doing.
Thank you, Dick. Sounds like you're doing some great projects, and I'm sure we'll jump into some of them shortly. I do want to, before I get into that, I want to introduce our next panelist, Corey Diamond. He's the Executive Director of Efficiency Canada. So Corey has 20 years of experience leading social change organizations focused on engaging people to take action on critical environmental and social issues. He's been a partner and CEO of the global consulting firm called Realized Worth and worked with a number of Fortune 500 companies on engaging employees in community projects, and spent 10 years as a leader with Summerhill, working with utilities, government agencies, private companies to drive some sustained energy savings. So although Corey now lives in Toronto, he does have some ties to, 2 separate ties actually to the Eastern Ontario. First, he lived in Ottawa as a co-op student back in the late 90s, where he had to walk across the bridge twice a day to get to his job at Gatineau. And there he discovered the warmth of a balaclava, which he still today believes is like must for Canadian winters. Secondly, actually the office of the Efficiency Canada is housed at Carleton University, so in the Ottawa region. Corey, over to you to provide a few more opening remarks before we jump into.
Great. Thanks, Nick. And I thought what I could do just to open up is just give an overview of Efficiency Canada and how the role we play in the system. So as Nick mentioned, we are housed at Carleton University as a research grant-based research organization, and we're kind of a mix between kind of a research think tank kind of policy shop combined with kind of a grassroots advocacy organization. So everything Efficiency Canada does is meant to help Canada unleash the undeniable potential of energy efficiency. And that means, helping to meet our climate targets, helping to advance Canada economically through things like job creation, and then also lead to greater social equity. For us, the three things we're doing are, number one, research. So we do a lot of research around what are the best policies around energy efficiency that we can get from around the world or around Canada and apply them to local or federal contexts. We do a lot of communications efforts too, trying to tell the story of energy efficiency and the people behind it. And then we do a lot of engagement work. And I'm sure many people on this call are part of this, but energy efficiency is overwhelmingly dominated by, small businesses who deliver this work. So we're trying to kind of bring all this diverse groups of organizations together to have one loud voice. And ultimately mobilize this sector so that the elected officials understand the value of energy efficiency to helping meet Canada's net zero future and also help Canada economically. We're very active federally. We do a lot of work, advocacy work in Ottawa, working with the government to encourage them to advance consistent and strong energy efficiency policies. You may have seen some of these come out in the fall, over $6 billion in funding federally to energy efficiency. We do a lot of work provincially too. Some of you may have seen our provincial energy efficiency scorecard, where we rank the provinces and how they're doing on policies and programs. In Ontario, is ranked fourth. It's a slip from the year before. We saw a reduction in savings and spending and EV registrations year over year, but we did see some good strengths as well, and things like non-wire, non-pipe alternatives. And then we do some advocacy work here in Ontario as well. And some of you may have seen the types of letters that we are encouraging people to sign. We had over 75 organizations come together and call for a renewed CDM framework, which we were happy to see was finally announced towards the end of the year. And then really for us, and which is kind of a theme I think I'll continue to bring up on this panel, is really trying to help coordinate this kind of soup, I would call it. There's federal climate policy, there's kind of provincial regulatory issues and government policies. And then there's municipal, a huge boom in municipal energy planning and things. So how do we bring all that together so that they're working in lockstep, and that the people who then deliver or implement this type of work and the people who then benefit from it understand that it's kind of a coordinated effort. So I'll talk a bit more about that as we get through some of the questions. Well, thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Corey. So there you have it. You have an opening pitch for each of us. So I do invite you to start to put some questions in our chat box. But I'm going to dive into a few questions to get things started. Start off with the theme on the local growth and economic development. So here in the Eastern region, we're seeing a lot of urban intensification and residential growth, as Keenan was showing, as you saw earlier this morning. We know that it's critical to ensure a reliable and adequate electricity supply to support this growth, while at the same time considering some of the local energy priorities. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, this is one of the reasons why we support Hydro Ottawa with our local program for targeting energy efficiency for the Canada North Stittsville area. And I'll ask these questions I'll start with Dick. How are you seeing economic growth and development considered in the broader context of local community energy planning and priority setting from your perspective?
This is my first direct involvement with the IESO. So I would have to say, until having listened to some of the presentations today, I would have said I haven't seen any. But that's my personal experience without coming from the energy field. I come from a telecom field. but I just hadn't noticed it, and we were surprised and thrilled when we found out that we just happened to be building a net metered project in the Canada North Stittsville area, where there was, for the first time in my understanding, a targeted efficiency plan for a specific region. So I just wasn't aware that the province was even considering that. I know that the German feed-in tariff program was based on that model. When I'd spoken to earlier people in the IESO many years ago, they said they had never considered the approval of solar systems for how they would improve the local grid or economic growth. So I was thrilled. We were thrilled and surprised when we found out about the happenstance correlation between our net metering project with the French Catholic School Board at Paul Desmarais School and the energy efficiency program in the same area. So
that's good. Well, I'm glad we could help enlighten you today on some of these
yes.
insights. Maybe Corey, kind of similar questions, let's hear from your perspective from energy efficiency and with Efficiency Canada. Where do you see some economic growth and development being considered in some of these broader context of local community energy planning and setting priorities?
Yeah, so one of the first things we did when we launched our organization in 2018 was come out of the gates with an economic impact study of energy efficiency in Canada, specifically around job creation. And everybody kind of talked about that and knew about it. And there were some good studies in the US, but there was nothing really ever in Canada about that. About a year later, Eco-Canada then released a report around looking at specifically employment. So employment in the energy efficiency sector, and it is still, the most comprehensive view of who's working in this sector. So when we look at this stuff, and it comes down to kind of the local or community energy planning, or through utilities or agencies like IESO, we always now we have stats and data where we can bring that part of the conversation in. So no longer do we have to say, hey, energy efficiency creates lots of jobs. We can actually say energy efficiency will create this amount of jobs next year in this area. And, joining the more than 436,000 people that currently do this work, you can also look at, from an economic development standpoint, that typically what ends up happening is that people who do energy efficiency upgrades, they are hiring local people. So the money that is spent is typically circulated in the local economy. So there's not many multinational kind of, organizations, corporations, and things that are coming in and doing that. It's still largely on the backs of local contractors and small businesses. And so you can make the case, not only is this expanding, these types of policies are expanding the economy locally, but they're also keeping the money locally. And I think that is what the elected officials like to hear, at least when we talk to them. So we're hoping that continues to grow, and that, especially on the natural gas side and in hearings with the Ontario Energy Board, that you can start to kind of make the case for that in a lot more kind of directed fashion, rather than in a kind of a more global or kind of general fashion.
And if I can quickly add, my frustration was what I was not seeing from the electricity system, the regulators, and the LDCs. Our membership all believe and are participating for the greatest extent on the basis of local ownership, local investment, local economic growth. It's universal on the side of our members. What I didn't see was the industry, the greater industry, implementing it or talking about it, except for advocates and some policymakers. But I absolutely believe it's true, and our members are putting their money into it. They want the money to stay in the community.
Well, that's good. I think it's through some of these types of dialogues that we're starting to connect this information, and part of this, part of this network that we've created is to have these inclusive dialogue, the efforts between the communities and the plannings and local municipalities and stakeholders, et cetera. Corey, based on your experience, how do you see this happening? And what are some of the important considerations from your experience working across Canada on having a dialogue with the different levels of government and communities?
Yeah, one of the things that I think energy efficiency has struggled with and continues to struggle with, even though we're trying our best, and others as well, like AESP in Ontario has been effective, is that because energy efficiency is not a sector in and of itself, you know, the people who are receiving types of comments or asking for input from, you know, various stakeholders, they're hearing multiple different things from multiple different groups, and sometimes they align and sometimes they don't. And so that's a real issue. And I think from, you know, let's say IESO's perspective or government's perspective, I think some education on first look, this is not a uniform sector. We're going to have some diverse opinions, even within, let's say, quote unquote, contractors. You know, you could have HVAC, you know, really behind something, and you could have, you know, insulators or electrical contractors not behind it. And so we're not a uniform. So first we got to understand that we are diverse. But that doesn't mean that we can't be more organized around advancing certain policies and certain things that we do all agree with. And I think that, you know, we're trying to do that with a brand new regional champions program, where we're going to have local input and try and, you know, have a champion in every province who is kind of trying to collect all that, do some local organizing. And then ultimately, you know, come down to the basics. One of the things I was reminded of recently in a meeting with a member of parliament is I started talking, you know, as I do, just kind of jump right into all this gobbledygook that no one outside of our sector knows. And he just asked me, like, step back. Can you kind of just like dumb it down for me a little bit? And I think sometimes in these kinds of discussions, and I jumped on earlier to the first part of this presentation, we're all so into it, but sometimes the conversations, you got to get back to the basics, and the basics include the values and the benefits and the core beliefs around energy efficiency. So that's just some comments or some you know, some road stories from my own experience.
No, that's good. That's good. Interesting. And I agree. I think Efficiency Canada is helping us unify our message a lot, and appreciate some of your efforts across Canada to help get this message across. So. Dick, you mentioned, you know, your organization, OREC and Co-Energy are very community-based, with social enterprise groups kind of responsible for all aspects of renewable projects. How is this approach that you're seeing in your community different, or how, I think you also drew upon some experiences you've seen in Europe. Maybe you can touch upon some of that in terms of how the energy planning in going in Eastern Ontario, some of the examples you're taking from Europe.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I can't really talk too much about energy planning because I don't have a background in energy planning, and my experience in this field is all since I joined OREC years ago. But my understanding of, and my family background is European, Northern Europe, so Holland. So I have an understanding and an interest in what's happened in Germany and Denmark and Belgium, and to a lesser extent in Holland. But in Denmark, the whole wind industry, to a great extent, was based on a law that changed in '73, when they enabled wind to move forward if the turbines were owned by the people in the community, within the specific municipality, county, whatever their equivalent was. That stopped NIMBY because the wind turbine that's turning is paying the mortgage of the people that are around it, but there's issues in noise and costs with every source of power generation and consumption. And if the wind is turning the turbine, the leaves are also blowing and making a bit of noise, but it's paying somebody's mortgage. It's paying my mortgage as an investor or my neighbor's mortgage as an investor. It's not just paying the landlord, right? But here, turbines are set up by a big organization from far away, and there's one landowner in the town or village, be much more support. As we've grown outside of government regulation or outside of government support, or without government support or involvement in the planning mechanism, we've never had a problem raising money or finding members. Members and money, I don't want to say flock, but come to us when we have projects. Our biggest challenge has always been getting projects. And under the FIT program, It was good in one sense in that there was a regularized procurement mechanism that we could fit into, but it always seemed to be out of sync with our abilities at the time. We were created after the first round of FIT contracts were awarded. Then the second FIT contracts, nothing was awarded in Eastern Ontario because of grid capacity. Then the third FIT program, the rates were lower, so the profitability was a little less. But anyway, we were able to grow to 19 projects under that regime. That all ended with the new government in power, and now the project acquisition or the ability to get new projects is based on pure economics and or goodwill to reduce carbon. It's been a slow couple of years, throw COVID in there. The last 2 years there haven't been many new things happen, even though all these municipalities have promised to be carbon neutral by a certain date. We've all lost several years of momentum, but there is a massive amount of interest by citizens to do stuff. It's just not being enabled by the regulators and the governments, or the LDCs, I must say.
Yeah, you're raising some good points, especially about the municipalities and the push for a lot of their climate action plans and community energy plans we're seeing now across Ontario. Maybe Corey, pulling on from that, you've been working with some municipalities, have you seen some different examples across Canada where we've been able to move, some of the municipalities have been able to move forward on their climate action plan and objectives? Can you share any insights on what innovative approaches or how you've seen some of these get off the ground?
Yeah, so it comes back to kind of what I was talking about earlier about being, ripping a page out of the kind of the grassroots kind of organizing model. Is that, what we're trying to do is making sure that the voices that are typically heard are being heard in an organized way to show that there are multiple, many different groups behind these types of policies. I haven't been involved in any of the kind of direct changes or community energy plans, but I have heard that the youth climate justice movement that was unleashed through Fridays for the Future and Greta Thunberg's work is really effective in Canada, and that one of the for those that follow some of the kind of nerdy municipal politics, the town of Whitby, just east of Toronto here, I have heard that was one of the reasons that local councillors decided to move ahead with a brand new building standard that mimicked the Toronto's green standard. So that's great to hear. And so, we're in this kind of strange world now where, you could potentially see people providing, a unified force of workers, contractors, people who work at local businesses, youth, all coming together. And whereas, you wouldn't think that they would have a lot to say about, future building codes in the kind of nerdy world of like building science, but they are. And so it's really cool to watch. And I think that's kind of putting some wind behind the sails for some of these communities to kind of really push forward on the implementation of their net zero plans.
Great. No, that's a good observation, and thanks for sharing. So we've been asking a lot of questions, but Amanda, maybe it's time we can open up some questions from the floor, from virtual floor. So I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you, Nick. Great, we've got some time. Let's open it up to some questions. So we had mentioned you could put them in the chat, but we'd also like to make sure that we're offering the opportunity to be interactive. If you want to open up your microphone, throw on your camera, that's your preference. But to do so, if you want to raise your hand, go down to the bottom of your screen, reactions, and there's the little button there that says raise hand. So if you have a question or a comment and you want to unmute your mic, raise your hand and we'll get you up here. Maybe while we're waiting for that, Nick, I have a question for you, Nick, something that was posted on the IESO Connects earlier, just while we're waiting for folks to see if there's any questions that come in. Okay, so the question is, we are interested in a community pilot project to determine power consumption at the macro level, engaging with a municipality that has a similar focus to drive conservation, and with that, engage homeowners to get excited about mitigating climate change while saving money. So I guess it's more of a comment that they've got an interest in exploring that.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting idea, and we've seen some of these ideas in the past, but especially as this new framework sets out some funding for local initiative, these are the types of ideas and thoughts that we'd like to hear from. So I invite you just to drop us a note and drop me a note about this, and we can catch up more on some of the details. But those types of initiatives are interesting that we'd like to get more from the marketplace and hear some of these solutions, especially if they're community led.
And if I can interject, that's the kind of thing that CoEnergy would love to get involved with and raise money from the community to do that kind of investment.
Great. Thank you, Dick. Maybe what I can do is I can point you, or I invite you to pop onto IESO Connects into that chat forum where someone has raised that, and perhaps I'm not sure if the person's on the line now, but perhaps that's also a way that you can respond directly to them.
Okay.
That would be great. Thank you, Dick.
Okay, I will.
I am just trying to scroll down. There we go. We've got another question here. Okay. All right. On aligning federal and municipal GHG reduction and climate change goals with provincial energy efficiency programs and regional system planning, what else can be done by IESO, the municipalities, utilities to ensure these two priorities are mutually beneficial and not competing with each other? What are the IESO's plans for this? So that's for Nick. And this next part is for Corey. What are the best practices elsewhere in Canada?
So I can maybe start it off, Corey, and then I'll pass it over. So yeah, we are continuously engaging with the feds on some initiatives that they'd like to see that happen across Canada, including in Ontario. And where we want to maximize is a seamless customer experience, where there's not confusion and you don't have to do two rebate applications, et cetera. So we work a lot of them. We have been doing some partnerships already with NRCan on some energy management programs. We do partnerships with other agencies as well. But our goal is to continuously keep talking with them. Challenging is when, timing of our frameworks, timing of the programs, logistics, et cetera. But we've been able to work this in the past, and we want to keep working on this going forward. And we see why not bring more federal dollars if there's out there to bring it in Ontario and help support some of our programs here, or complement programs where we have a gap in our programming. Right.
Yeah, it's there's not an easy fix because every policy is going to create its own kinds of challenges. But we thankfully we're playing a role where we're almost acting as an in-between between what we're seeing provincially and municipally, and then making sure that NRCan and other departments of federal government hear that. I know they're trying as hard as possible. There's the recent home retrofit initiative that will be, that was announced as policy in the fall economic statement, will be unleashed soon. That could butt up against, some local provincial programs, and already we've been trying to connect the people that deliver those programs directly on the ground to NRCan to make sure that that they are understanding the benefit. I do believe there is a lot of goodwill all around, and so it's just a matter of making sure that there's a place for someone like yourself or others to say, okay, here's the consideration that nobody's thought of, like, who do I talk to? So I would encourage people to reach out to us. If we don't know or can't connect you to the right people, then we will know who can connect you to the right people. And then to look at best practices, there is a group in BC that we really work closely with called the HPSC. It's called the Home Performance Stakeholder Council, and they're really trying to bring the kind of Clean BC plus the region of Vancouver's aggressive climate action plans in lockstep with what NRCan is trying to do federally and help Canada meet net zero. So that's a good example. I'd be happy to connect you with them as well. So you can connect with me offline if you like.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Nick. Tom Brackenberry, I see you've got your hands up. We can unmute your line. Tom's with Utilities Kingston. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks very much. I just wanted to applaud the IESO for doing these customer engagements. This is one of the best attended events I think I've seen in a while. And Corey kind of touched on the complexities and how I think sometimes we have to pull back and try and get people to understand some of the bigger picture. And I think that's what I'm struggling with right now. I'm seeing a lot of things converging as an employee at an LDC, but I don't have the solution. I think distributors have consistently come to the table when the OEB and the IESO have asked them to try and like we implement the solutions, but and we try to influence the policies. But I think here this is an example where the customers really need to let the IESO know what they want and help us as the distributors to you know, help then get those policies changed and put in place so that we can help with the solution. But sorry, there's more what I'm seeing right now, and I guess what I'm kind of interested in hearing is how can we improve that customer engagement even further. And I'll just give an example of the kinds of things that I'm seeing right now. I'm seeing you know, our municipality commissioned a population growth study for the region, and it actually extends beyond Kingston, and it's predicting very higher than normal growth. And I think we don't know where, because of COVID, we can't say for sure that that's going to be, say, intensified in the city or in the surrounding rural area. But I think regardless of COVID, we know that all the predictions are saying that this area is going to grow. And I think we've seen a movement of people out of the urban cores to the areas. So there's going to be growth in our Peterborough, Kingston region, and no doubt in my mind. Just I can't say exactly where, which I know is part of the problem. Then you know, we see electrification coming along, and there's some pretty good numbers now of how electrification of at least the passenger vehicle fleets are going to go. So we've got some numbers now starting to predict, and governments are setting targets on those, which are helping, I think. So we've got kind of that growth. We've got also electrification of heating, and our largest institutional customers have already consulted with us at a high level and said the only solution we can see is to, in order to decarbonize, and meet a net zero target, the only solution we can see is to electrify our heat. The hydrogen solutions aren't out there yet. And so these kind of customers, municipal, federal, provincial, are going to be the first movers and shakers, and they're going to go with what they know and what they can actually do. And they've got targets to do this over the next 10, 15 years. And 2050, they want to be there. So I'm kind of seeing, and sorry, the solutions don't seem, the other thing I'm seeing is residential high-rise development in our area coming in, and developer is going all electric, heat pumps and electric heat, because it's actually easier to build the building that way than to plumb in natural gas and do all these duct work and things like that. So from a first cost point of view, it's actually easier for developers, I believe, to go and put in an all electric building, but they're not paying the cost, the operating cost. And I was interested at the outlook in the IESO. It's actually, you know, got some electricity price predictions there. And I don't know, I think we need to somehow get all our customers and our developers to kind of start looking at the big picture and say, okay, if we're going to electrify this, how much and when, and then we can figure out what infrastructure we need to put in. But then are you prepared to pay for that in the future as well? And those are all the things that we're kind of really trying to figure out on our side.
Can I jump in with a quick comment? Mass support for net metering and virtual net metering. If you're building a building, there should be generation close by.
Yes, so we're an urban utility. We did
lots of roofs in Kingston.
Yes, we do. Yes,
lots of flat roofs that were built the last 20 years.
Very good. Yeah, we commissioned a study years ago when a lot of the solar microfit started, and they basically did a GIS. A student did a GIS study of rooftops, and believe it or not, there's not a significant amount of residential and small commercial rooftops. That mainly resides with the large institutional type customers. So, and I've got a microfit on my roof right now, and I'm looking at the output. And I agree that it's part of the solution by no doubt, but this net zero model hinges on aggregating your energy over a year. But as the energy provider, I've got to meet your demand, when
Yep.
you need it. So yes, I've calculated that I am net zero for all my electricity usage over the year, but most of it's produced in the summer, but I consume a lot of it in the winter. So again, the utility is there, is the one that needs, and the ISO, we need to provide the distribution and transmission assets to get you the energy when you need it. Solar is going to help, energy storage is going to help, but they're not going to meet all of these growth demands that I've mentioned.
Right. But Kingston Utilities doesn't have to pay as much for peak load from Hydro One at your interconnection because of a solar offsetting your peak demand. And you were only talking solar. Now there's a bit of wind in Kingston, there's a bit of biogas. So mix them up. It's not just one technology, it's just one option.
Agreed. Yeah, we're an urban, we're the urban area. So again,
Yep.
This is where the net zero definition becomes really interesting, right? Because the wind and the solar assets that you're talking about are going to be outside of the urban area for a large part of it, that the stuff that's going to offset what our customers are using. And that's fine. But I think it's an interesting discussion. What is net zero? What region, like if I build a building net zero, that's a much harder challenge than building a municipality that's net zero, because now I can use all of my space and all of my resources. But if I narrow it down to just a city block, it's a lot harder to make that block net zero.
Right. But if your building is cheaper to build by the builder, if it's all electric, because he doesn't have to put in the heating ducts and all those other things, maybe he could go up, he could upscale the quality of his roof so that big box store with the just to regulation roof that can't take the load of a solar system would be built a little better and stronger so that you could have self-generation. Anyway, it's a complicated, multifaceted set of cost trade-offs and regulations. So it's the city's responsibility to, or the province's responsibility to make sure all the roofs are built to a code that will enable generation.
Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think what you have to understand, or what we have to all agree, is that there's room for all of these solutions, and that this is an IESO meeting. And what I think what we really want to leverage here is the fact that we need more transmission assets, because DER, like all these DER and energy efficiency alone are not going to address the growth that we're seeing. Like I'm hearing numbers between 1.5 to 4 times the demand that we currently have by 2050.
Yeah. But transmission alone won't either.
No, and, I agree totally. But we're here for transmission today, and that's what I want to get.
I'm here for my rate bill and my tax bill. So my tax bill's been subsidizing my rates for 40 years. That's what I'm upset about.
I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not arguing with you. I just think we still need that transmission asset, as well as that choice for you. You need that choice. But I can tell you, I also have a family cabin north of here, and it's still cheaper for me to have hydro than to put in solar.
Because of my tax bill.
Fair enough. I'm not going to argue, but it's only going to go up more.
My rates or my taxes?
So we might
I'll stop.
I'm just keeping an eye on the time, but definitely great perspectives. Thank you, and some food for thought there, particularly towards the end. Thanks, Tom. That was great. It was great to get your perspective, both as a resident and as part of a local utility. So I appreciate that. We do have a question in the chat. I'd like to try and see, Nick, I'm not sure if you can speak to this, but let's see. Is there an effort afoot to ask Hydro One to raise their threshold for line impact assessments to avoid unnecessarily burdening projects with a $5,000 cost? I don't know if that's something that you're able to speak to.
Not sure I know exactly what that's referring to, so I probably wouldn't do it a good justice to answer your question. Apologies.
No worries there. I wasn't sure. I just thought I'd throw it out. And before we move on, Brandon, I think you had your hand up. I just wanted to check in to see if you still wanted to ask a question or provide a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you're considering to reduce the transmission costs, looking at combined heat and power, and encouraging industrial customers to install combined heat and power projects so they can supply themselves and back onto the grid as well.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and combined heat and power is something that we've been supportive, and we supported a lot in the past framework. Where we've been a bit challenged is natural gas fired CHP projects, where it's there's been different models you can look at, could be at odds against our climate action plans. So, but there are some waste energy recovery projects. That's where we're be able to reuse some of the excess heat and able to support the CHP project. So those are some that we've been supporting, and I look forward to seeing those other types of solutions come forward, especially as we looking to do some industrial calls in the future to meet some of our needs going forward, where we're able to support some of these larger industrial types of projects.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks for that question, Brandon. And thank you very much to our panel today, Nick and Corey and Dick. You offered some great perspectives. I like that everyone had something different to share as part of the discussion. And I liked the follow-up discussion that kind of spurred from it as well. So we really appreciate that. Super, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
So the next part of the agenda, we've got our breakout discussions. So this is part of the agenda that I mentioned earlier that we're looking for you to drive. So it's also an opportunity, I hope, for you to meet other people in the regions. So I will try and provide a high-level, quick recap of how it works. So what we're going to do is we're going to move everybody into breakout sessions, and our tech, Patrick, has already kind of got them organized. So in a moment, you're going to be seeing a link pop up on your screen, and you just click that link and it takes you into your breakout room. So we're going to explore one question first. So the questions are there. What kind of local energy solutions or other initiatives are being considered or should be considered to meet your future electricity needs? We'll talk about that for 5 minutes. Then we'll come back, we'll do a report back, and then we'll break out in a different group for 10 minutes on the second question, which is kind of drilling a little bit further. What action, information, or resources is needed to help implement some of these energy solutions? And then we'll have a report back. So something I just want to ask, please, before Patrick, before you put up the breakout links, once you get into your groups, if someone could be designated as a note taker, the idea is that when we come back as part of the report back, we'd love to see just, some of the high-level themes popped into the chat there, or we can open up the phones and the cameras as we just did, just to have a share back. But unfortunately, what's the conversations that take place in these breakout sessions, they're not part of the recording. So we're kind of relying on you to do the report back to help share it and make sure that it's captured. Okay, just gonna make sure I've covered everything. Yep, I think so. Okay, so in a moment, Patrick, if you could put everyone in their breakout rooms. So just to reiterate, the first question, and I'm gonna put it in the chat too, so it's handy, is what kinds of local energy solutions or other initiatives are being considered or should be considered to meet your future energy needs? Thank you. Okay, let's get those breakout sessions going. Enjoy, everybody. Thank you. I see folks trickling back. Great. Hopefully you all had a good opportunity to meet some new folks and kind of chat about some interesting things. So, okay, so what I'm going to invite you to do now, this is kind of, we're not going to call anyone out, but was there anything in your discussions that really jumped out for you? Something that you think that others may agree with or want to learn more about? Chances are if it came up in your discussions, it's something that others are interested in learning about it too. So feel free, we've got some time now. If you want to enter some points into the chat, or if you want to share with us verbally, that's an option too. You can put your hand up. Again, just a reminder, it's at the you can raise your hand at the bottom from, I believe it's the reactions button.
If I jump in for my group.
Hi, Dick.
Sorry. Okay. Bernie from Madawaska was suggesting something which we quickly discovered was basically virtual net metering. There's an interest in that area of Renfrew County to have electricity generation locally that is not just going into the transmission lines and heading towards Toronto or the rest of the province, but is pre-allocated to businesses and citizens in that region so that they can assure new businesses or old established businesses that they've got a somewhat dedicated energy source that's coming from within the area. And this is a concept called virtual net metering, where the generation is not on the site of the consumer, but is allocated to a consumer across the grid. And it's a system that's intentionally not allowed at this point. There's some talk at the part of the Ministry of Energy about allowing something called community net metering, which is not what, I don't think that's what Bernie's asking for. The initial initiative of community net metering, as I understand it, is just for a campus facility where the different meters are next to one another or co-located. So that would not serve what WASCA is looking for.
Great, thank you. So the idea of kind of keeping that generation local instead of flowing eastwards and just to support local economic development.
Yeah, rather than always going to the transmission line.
Great, thank you. So we do have a hand up, but I just wanted, so in the chat, we're also seeing something that could be considered or should be considered to meet future electricity needs is aging assets and economic development. So yeah, we heard that echoed the economic development portion in Dick's report back. Roger, did you want to share something? You can unmute your mic. And Roger Peters.
Yeah, okay, I was in group one. There was a couple of topics that came up. One was the fact that maybe rural areas are not being treated as well in terms of planning as urban areas are. And there's a lot of local aging distribution lines that need to be addressed. The other question was whether behind the meter solar and storage should be treated as a conservation and demand management resource, so be eligible under the various programs like the targeted program in Canada North. So those, we didn't get far in the conversation, but those were the two topics that came up.
Great, thank you. We've got some comments in the chat there too. Does anybody else want to share anything? Again, through the chat, I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Or if you wanted to raise your hand, you're welcome to open up your microphone.
Yeah, Bob Walker here. Our group talked to a certain extent similar topics to Dick's group, but one of the things we brought up was the province allowing consolidation or consortiums whereby groups of small producers could get together to produce electricity and sell it as a group. For example, my group's thing is small hydro using existing dam sites. Dick's groups are mostly into solar, and by getting together with that and and other solar producers like the city of Ottawa is talking about a solar development at the Trail Road dam site or dump site, get together as a group to be able to provide 24/7 electricity and sell it as a group. And it goes back to what Dick was saying. They'd also have to allow net metering and virtual net metering. Because, for example, our main dam site, one end is in the rural part of the city of Ottawa. The other is in the municipality of North Grenville. The city of Ottawa, the dam site is served by Hydro One and not by Hydro Ottawa. But Hydro Ottawa would likely as not be either a customer or a transporter of the electricity for us.
Great. Great. Thank you, Bob. Okay, before we break out into the second groups, I just wanted to do a bit of a scan to make sure that there's nothing anyone else wanted to share at this time. There's always opportunities for after as well, but I just want to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Okay. Super, thanks everyone. Oh, I love to see that folks are having these conversations and it's great to hear about them. Okay, so let's get ready for our second discussion group. So same idea, just different folks. We're going to give about, let's try 8 minutes for this. Yeah, 8 minutes for that on the timer once we break out. And so the focus of this one is what action, information, or resources is needed to help implement some of these energy solutions. So what we kind of explored in the first question. So what's needed to help implement these? So I'm going to pop it into the chat. And then Patrick, I'm going to ask if you can set up the breakout groups, please, and then put 8 minutes on the timer. Enjoy, everybody. Great. Thanks. It looks like people are coming back. Thank you. Okay, let's do a bit of a report back. I don't know if we'll take 10 minutes. Let's take a few minutes at least though. All right, so what were some of the things that jumped out at you from these discussions? What are some of the things that you want to share? Again, you can put it in the chat or feel free to kind of pop your hand up and we'll get your mics opened up.
Where's my hand?
Whoever just said, where's my hand? You're open, so you can just chat.
Oh, okay. My apologies. It's
okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's Greg Van Dusen. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs at Hydro Ottawa. Hello, Amanda.
Hi there.
Long time no see.
Yeah, it's been a while.
So when you talk about barriers to change and barriers to implementing some of the things that we talked about before, I mean, there's some very obvious things. One is government legislation needs to, and/or government philosophy needs to change around some of the rules. Then you have the Ontario Energy Board and their rate making authority and how they allow for or don't allow for microgrids and distributed energy resources and virtual net metering and how that gets priced. So there obviously needs to be some thought given there. And there is, I mean, the stakeholder consultations, both at the IESO and at the Ontario Energy Board on distributed energy resources. So there is progress that's being made both at the IESO and the OEB. The government, as we mentioned before, is thinking about community net metering, which is a step forward. But there's also a bit of philosophical approach our group talked about in terms of the industry needing to get their head around that this is the future and this is the way it's going, and there needs to be more coming together and joint-minded approaches taken to it. So I suggested one of the things that would help is that old people like me retired. That may be more helpful to the entire industry. So I was a little bit disappointed that everyone agreed with that, but anyway. So those are just a few of the things we talked about. I mean, so part of it is you know, you don't want to point your finger at the government and say it's all their fault, or the OEB and the IESO say you got to change. But there are changes that can happen at that level. But more importantly, you know, there's got to be this movement of the industry together saying this is right because the customer benefits. The customer gets a lower price and the same sort of reliability and safety with these resources, these types of approaches, virtual net metering and distributed energy resources and microgrids. And therefore, because it's better for the customer, we need to get together and move forward on that. There's also obviously a bit of the discussion about the players in the industry. I mean, the LDCs, you know, without trying to speak on half of every LDC, I mean, there's a philosophical thing is obviously we'd like to play in the distributed energy resource field. And there are a lot of energy service providers who would like to see us not play in that field for obvious reasons, given our monopoly status. And so there's that sort of tension as well. But at the end, the tension that's got to win out is the customer. I mean, what's best for the customer? And certainly cost is the most prevalent thing for the customer. And by and large, we're seeing that a lot of jurisdictions are getting lower costs for their customers by moving this way, implementing green energy and distributed energy resources and microgrids. So that's kind of the comments, the discussion we had in our group.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks, Gregory, for sharing that. Anyone else? Any thoughts about Gregory's, what Gregory shared on behalf of his group, or something you want to share on behalf of your group?
If I can interject, our group, again, we had a municipal person in our group, Olivier from Prescott Russell, and he was also, like Bernie earlier from Madawaska, calling for more municipal generation for the local businesses and the ability to make decisions locally. Generally, we all thought that Betty Watson's policies or her presentation should be front and center in the future of Ontario's electricity grid and planning and design and across the country, and that there should be more ability to aggregate power across multiple sources of generation. And that generally there should be a very positive set of regulations in favor of distributed generation, distributed energy resources, not against the thought of or it's almost like there's a predator along the lines of what Greg Van Dusen just said.
Great. Thanks, Dick. And just to clarify, so Dick, you made mention of Betty Watson. For those that weren't participating in this morning's session, Betty presented and provided some great insight into DERs. So that's available. That will be available online shortly if you would like to reference that. Great. Thanks, Dick. Anybody else?
Yeah, Bob Walker here from room 4. I guess one of the big things we discussed was loosening up the regulatory regime to allow a lot of different projects and at least some pilot projects so that we can learn, because everybody, IESO, Hydro One, Hydro Ottawa, a lot of the big players all want to get going on this. Just the regulatory regime isn't allowing all this. So the opening up of that has to be, I guess, the first thing to be done so we can get moving.
Thank you. Thanks, Bob. I'm definitely hearing a lot of themes here.
I was just going to add, I was in the same group with Bob. There was also a theme, and I think this came up in the other breakout, but economic development. So Carol is in Prescott and was talking about how it's an economic development issue there. They don't have transmission capacity. Again, there's some alternatives to maybe get going, but I think there's with the type of growth that we're looking at, again, 1.5 to 4 times type demand growth. We need all hands on deck, all solutions on deck. This is an exponential growth problem by 2030, 2035. We need to get going on the transmission and all of these solutions.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Right. Okay. Thanks. All right. If we don't have anyone else to hear from right now, maybe we'll move on to the next portion of our agenda. But I just want to say thanks to everybody. Thank you for participating in those breakout sessions. It's really great insight, and your comments will help to certainly inform future discussions, and it's just really great takeaways. So we really appreciate you being so keen on doing the report back. You know, something that's kind of tricky in in-person sessions, you know, you could have a room full of people, but sometimes it's like one of the biggest challenges is getting folks to do that report back. So that's amazing. I think that doing that in a virtual platform, I think is especially great. So what a great group. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So for the last portion of our agenda, so we've got Jim Keach from Utilities Kingston. So I'm really pleased to introduce Jim. So Jim Keach is President and CEO of Utilities Kingston. And I've had the pleasure of working with Utilities Kingston and Jim for some years now. And Jim, you've been a speaker at a number of our past events in the East, and we always appreciate the support, and we always appreciate the perspectives that you bring, and your passion for the community and the work that you do really shines through in those remarks. So, and the information that you share and your thoughts. So I look forward to hearing more about the path forward that Utilities Kingston has as you work to respond to your changing customers' needs. So thank you for being here, Jim. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Amanda. I appreciate the opportunity and the introduction, and I'm assuming everybody can hear and see me okay, unless I hear otherwise. First off, I want to apologize to the organizers from the IESO today. I was not able to take part in this morning's session, and I was actually quite interested in it, and I would like to, but just couldn't make that work. And it is interesting, you know, we talk about some of the downsides of COVID and not being able to meet in person. one of the opportunities it does provide, since we're doing this virtually, you can actually take part in a number of different things over the course of a day that you wouldn't normally be able to do. So I am very excited actually to have the opportunity to talk today, and I genuinely say that for actually a number of reasons. And I'm going to basically base my presentation on that this afternoon in the few minutes that I have. First off, and I just need to note that Tom and I did not have a conversation beforehand, because in some ways he's set me up very well for some of the comments I'm going to make. But we are concerned, and I am concerned about the bulk planning exercise that's taking place. That's been touched on a little bit today. I'm not going to repeat any of it, but you know, with some of the things I'm going to talk about that we're looking at in Kingston, it does make this exercise very important, particularly when you're looking at the 115 system, the 230 system, and you look at where Kingston is. Kind of right at the point where these two come together, and you know, some of the concerns we do have in that regard. So again, appreciate the opportunity to take part and have an opportunity to express our comments in that regard. The next one, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, is the title of today's session. As I saw when I first read it, really did intrigue me, and intrigued me as to how it relates to some of the things that we are doing at Kingston, some of my own personal thoughts. So it was around strengthening communities through energy choices. And I'm going to split that in half and talk about strengthening communities. And our vision at Utilities Kingston, I'm not going to read through it and bore people in that regard, but it does look at what we do at Utilities Kingston, which is different from most in that we offer water, sewer, fiber, gas and electricity services to the municipality. So we are looking at utilizing our offerings to basically build better communities, and that is part of our vision. And you know, a big part of that is in energy and energy choices, and the fact that we are a distributor that offers both gas and electricity. And you know, I think some other things I'm going to touch about near the end, I think fits quite nicely into it. And then the energy choices, I think is really key, and I think the one comment that I want to make that I hope sticks with people is, I think you really need to seriously look at what the choices are going forward and not settle on any one solution. And in thinking about this, I kind of went back over my tenure here at Utilities Kingston, the Public Utilities Commission before. So I'm just shy of 40 years in the two organizations, and I guess in an organization that long, you do get some history lessons. And if I go back to the early 80s when I first started as electrical distribution engineer, the key focus at that point in time was off oil. And the federal government, I believe, was offering grants, I think it was $800 a household, to move you from oil to electricity or gas. And interestingly enough, there seemed to be a real focus in Kingston to go to electricity as opposed to gas for I think a number of reasons at that point that have changed. So, you know, I kind of started out the move from oil to electricity. And there was a significant move in that regard. And again, just in the role that I had as a distribution engineer, it resulted in you know, some pretty major changes to the distribution system at that point. Adding 20 kilowatt furnaces in a small area. And then you move along, and the price issues happen between electricity and gas, and basically the price of electricity was up considerably compared to gas, and then a move basically away from electricity to gas for economic reasons. And then as we move more into conservation concerns on electricity and fuel switching and whatnot, and I'm not sure we all got this right, but again, a bit more of a push from electricity to gas. And now, you know, sitting here, I guess many years later, you know, almost 40 years ago back to the start of this, and listening to the concerns, and I know in the city of Kingston, there is significant concerns. I think that's one of the reasons that Terry was at council last night, looking at the possibility of moving heating customers, home heating customers, businesses. Tom touched a little bit on some of our large customers from gas onto electricity because of the emissions, and also some concerns about you know, generation and utilizing gas in that regard. So, the reason I wanted to touch on this, it's interesting how kind of things go over the course of time. And I do think, as opposed to settling on any one solution, we do need to look at all the solutions that are available, and not just electricity, gas, but you know, the new alternatives that are coming up. As we talk about fuel cells, hydrogen, etc. I think this all needs to fit together. So again, I was intrigued with the topic today. I want to move a little bit more towards kind of what we're looking at Kingston and some of the things that we are dealing with in Kingston. Tom touched a bit on these, but and it was mentioned, I have had the opportunity or the pleasure to talk at a number of these events. Normally, I will talk about how Kingston, from the low growth perspective, is pretty steady, 1 or 2%, not much happens. We are seeing changes, significant changes. I was going to use the term unprecedented changes, but personally, I got a little bit sick of that being used over the last year or so, so I try to stay away from that. But we're looking at load growth that I haven't seen in the time that I've been here. It's been being driven by a number of things. The student population at Queen's University continues to grow, and there's a lot of pressure on housing in Kingston, particularly in the Kingston core in our service area. We're seeing a lot of infill. That's causing us to look very differently at our distribution system, including bringing along our voltage upgrade that we have been, I would say, slower than most LDCs at, but really an accelerated pace for that to meet the development. A lot of that focused around students. We've had a couple of very major industries move into town, and that has had an impact, I believe, and these are not Canadian industries, one from Portugal and one from China, and I think that's had a positive impact. But again, low growth, residential road growth, and some of the spin-off industries. The other thing, and I think we're struggling right now to see how significant this is going to be, and is it going to continue on? And this is going to be kind of my one comment about the COVID and the pandemic. But, we are hearing, I think everyone or a lot of people are hearing, there's a bit of a move from the major metropolitan areas, so the GTA area around Kingston, but also Montreal and Vancouver, to not necessarily to rural, but maybe smaller metropolitan areas. We are starting to see some of that in Kingston, and we think that there's going to be a pretty significant impact in Kingston. And personally, I can tell you, housing prices and whatnot have spiked up like we have not seen, I don't think, ever before. So, you factor all that in, it does impact our low growth from a distribution perspective. As I said, we're looking at a number of different things, including bringing forward a voltage upgrade. And it's also obviously impacting transmission into the area. And I go back to my comments about the bulk planning, the 150 and the 230, the concerns that we have about that. And you're listening to some of the presentations this afternoon, and you hear the comments about Ottawa, and realizing a much larger metropolitan area, but just hoping that we, Kingston, don't get lost in that. And I'm sure there are others on the conference today, even in smaller communities, that would be concerned about that likewise. The growth is good. It creates opportunities. It also creates challenges. And one of the challenges is from a financial perspective. I don't need to tell anybody who's involved in this industry from an LDC perspective about how heavily regulated we are from a rates perspective. We're all very aware of that. We're all very careful as to where we spend the dollars. And finding that it's even more of a balancing act, more of a challenge right now, looking at making sure that we have the funds available for the load growth, extremely important, from our perspective and from the communities as well. Also, making sure that we have money to put into system renewal. And I know that there were questions asked earlier in that regards, not to us, but to others. Is that continually being looked at? Because reliability continues to be a key concern. And one of the factors that we're faced with here at Kingston, which may be different from a number of others, our distribution rates are very, very low, some of the lowest in the province. So when you do the, some of the calculations, looking at what developers pay, what the ratepayers pay, it actually puts more of a burden on the developers than some of our neighbors where the rates are higher, and trying to balance that off as well. And being in the middle of a pandemic, we actually deferred our cost of service application last year. We just spoke about this at our board yesterday, and the decision was to defer that again for this year, so putting it out really 3 years from where we were. That is eventually going to have an impact, and concerns about that, and just don't want that to get out of hand. So those are some of the things that we are looking at in Kingston, some of the things that we are dealing with from a low growth perspective, from a distribution system, and obviously working its way up to the to the provincial grid and the planning exercise that was mentioned that we continue to want to be involved with and have input into. I want to go back again to I indicated a number of reasons that I was interested in today, and back to the comment I made earlier about our vision and the fact that we do water, sewer, fiber, gas, and electricity. And believe it or not, I want to talk a little bit about our sewer utility. And I'm sure most people on the call didn't think that they were going to get a lesson in sewage collection and treatment on a energy conference. But just want to focus on that a little bit because we have a biogas project that we've been working on the conceptual stages. Beyond that, looking at some of the regulatory approvals and whatnot. And what that is, and I'll describe this very quickly, and I could spend the next 2 hours talking about this because I find it extremely exciting. When you collect sewage and treat sewage, you end up with basically 3 products. You end up with water that goes back, that treated water that goes back into the lake. You end up with the sludge that is spread on farmers' fields. Then you end up with methane, so gas, and very close to natural gas. And I think over the years, the methane has been looked at as a byproduct that you kind of had to deal with. And you dealt with it by using it for process heat in the plant. Heating in the wintertime, quite often it was just flared off to get rid of it safely. And more recently, and I know at one of our plants, we have a small cogen unit, but not really looking at it as a resource. And we've actually shifted that at Utilities Kingston, and the City of Kingston is a big supporter of that, is looking at this as a resource and a green energy resource, a green gas resource, it's sometimes referred to, as opposed to trying to get rid of it. Actually looking at how can we put this from a sewage plant that is currently under an upgrade, and also looking at adding municipal organics to it to again increase the amount of gas, the amount of methane that's produced. And also seeing if we can make this into a regional project. So, look at other neighbors. I know we've had conversations with some of these smaller municipalities in the area, both from a sewage sludge perspective, taking gas from that, and also taking their organics to basically produce more methane, clean it, and then inject it back into our natural gas pipelines. And again, we do have a natural gas utility and distribute it to our customers, so it saves bringing it all the way from the United States currently now as we get some, or from Western Canada, and it is viewed as a green energy source. So again, something very exciting that we're looking at doing, and I think something different. That goes back to my comment earlier about looking at all energy sources. I think this is something very different. So in concluding, I just kind of want to go back and again thank the IESO for this opportunity. I believe this is the 3rd or 4th time that I've had the chance to speak, and one of the reasons that I did want to have the chance to talk today, it's interesting, one of the last speakers made the comment about all the old guys need to retire. So that is something that I'm going to do to help the industry out. I plan on doing it at the end of this year, so I will have an opportunity to address this group again. So I want to thank you for the opportunity. And, having spent 40 years in this industry, I would say that I would safely say we've seen more changes and more excitement in the last 10 than we did in the first 30. I think the next 5 is going to be similar to that. And I think there's lots of opportunities, there's lots of challenges. And, I think it's important that for all of you staying behind, working on this, realize the importance that it is to look at new opportunities, look at new solutions, be open-minded, because what you do is extremely important to everyone, communities, all it's on a go-forward basis. So again, thanks for this opportunity to address you, and stay safe.
Great. Thank you so much, Jim. Here we go. As always, we appreciate it, and we appreciate your insight and your candor. And I also want to take the opportunity to wish you all the best and congratulations on your retirement. We know you've got 2021 to deal with yet, so you're not off the hook yet, but that's a really exciting milestone and achievement and something to be proud of. You've got a great legacy that you're leaving behind you, so congratulations.
Very much, appreciate that.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Okay, folks, I know, we're kind of at the tail end of things, so thanks for sticking with us. I just want to thank everyone for your participation and your comments today. So the objective of this meeting was to hear your views and key issues to help inform future discussions and planning in the East. So just a really high level, really quickly, some of the things that we heard coming out of the discussions today. There's concerns being raised that smaller communities and rural communities are getting lost in the broader regional planning discussion and the focus. Rural versus urban is, maybe their aging assets are being addressed very differently. You'd like to see some virtual net metering opportunities being unlocked. So whether that's at a provincial level or a regulatory level, there's some barriers there that you're kind of seeing. Economic development, obviously, capacity and accessible to reliable supply of electricity is very important to help support economic development. So you'd like the opportunity to explore being more self-sufficient and keeping your electricity and your power supply within your own communities instead of having it dispersed elsewhere. And we've also heard some concern and interest around the 115 kV system, and how that's going to be addressed as part of the regional planning process, but more broadly, the bulk planning. So definitely lots of things to kind of take away from this discussion. So as I mentioned, we're going to be providing a post-forum report that will capture all of these discussions and hopefully address some of the things that we didn't get a chance to talk about today. And we'll have that prepared around the end of February. That's when we're aiming for. And we'll send it a communication through the network member communication when that's prepared. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this session. It's been a great pleasure speaking with all of you. I know there's a lot of things that people are missing about being home with the pandemic, but I'm definitely missing these face-to-face conversations with people and the opportunity to learn more about your communities and your interests and your municipalities and just to hear more about your priorities and your needs. So this is a way to kind of capture that, and we really appreciate your participation. We will be sending out a survey to follow later. We just want to find out, get some feedback. How can we continue to make these better? We want to make sure that it's something you enjoy participating in and that you're getting kind of what you're looking for out of these. So we've tried to keep the survey short. There's only a few questions. So if you had a moment to provide your feedback, that would be greatly appreciated. And I mentioned earlier that our session's recorded today, so that will be available afterwards for those unable to join, or if you want to revisit something. So we've got a slide up there. So I'm going to leave you with that information on how to get involved. So network members do receive regular communications and updates from us, as well as invitations to join important dialogues online. So if you're not a network member, I'd encourage you to join. There's information on IESO Connects, how to join there. And thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And stay safe and healthy, everyone, and hang in there. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.